From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Gleason.
Here.
Supervisor Scribner.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Here.
Thank you very much. And the next item on our agenda, we're going to do our flag salute, and that is going to be led by Ramona Gia. She is a retired Bakersfield City School District teacher, and we welcome her. If you could all please stand, and after the flag salute, remain standing for a moment of prayer, silence, or meditation.
Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, so welcome to the Tuesday, May 9th, 2017 meeting of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. If you'd like to follow along with our agendas, they are available at the two tables in the back by the doors, and we're going to start with our consent agenda. All items listed with a CA above the item are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the audience wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item or items on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken on the consent agenda. A member of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda, and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. So at this time, I am going to read the consent agenda items. Starting on page 2, items 2 through 4, as well as 6 through 9 are all on consent. On page 3, items 12, 13, and 14 are on consent. Page 4, all items 17 through 23 are on consent. On page 5, items 24 through 28 are on consent, and I have a new recommendation to read in for item 28. So strike out all of the uppercased wording, and the staff's recommendation will be continue to Tuesday, May 23rd, 2017 at 9 a.m. And also on page 5, item 30 is on consent. On page 6, finally, item 31 is on consent. Are there any members of the audience that would like to make comment on any items on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the... Yes, sir.
No, that's not time for public comments.
Okay. If you're waiting for public comments, that is going to be coming up after we do our resolutions and proclamations. And but does anyone have any comments on the consent items that I just read? Okay, seeing none, we'll return to the board. Do we have a motion on consent?
Motion on consent.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you very much. And so now return to page 2 on our agenda. Item number 1, this is a resolution honoring Theresa Monsibias, Department of Human Services, upon her retirement with 27 years of dedicated service to the County of Kern. I understand that she was unfortunately unable to join us this morning, and so we're going to go ahead and adopt the resolution, and the presentation will be made at a later date. So I'll ask Supervisor Gleason for a motion on this.
Motion to adopt resolution.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. And now on to item 5. This is a proclamation to proclaim May 10th, 2017 as Day of the Teacher in Kern County, and Supervisor Maggard will make this presentation.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Please reconfirm your vote. Thank you. The motion is approved. All ayes.
Good morning. Good morning, colleagues. We are here today to proclaim May 10, 2017 as Day of the Teacher in Kern County. I am joined by Anna Posey, who is a retired teacher from Wasco High School. Wasco Elementary, sorry. And by Shirley Wold, who is a retired teacher from the Bakersfield City School District. Back in 1982, the governor proclaimed the second Wednesday in May as Teacher Appreciation Day in Kern County. And it's the Day of the Teacher, rather, for all over the state. And we're going to declare that to be the case here in Kern County. I know that you can remember back to a teacher that impacted your life, that you remember as your favorite or as the person that opened up the world, because after our parents, a teacher is the first adult who actually causes us to see beyond the walls of our home and see what the world could be for us and how we could expand our view of things, the horizon that we all aspire to be a part of. So I have great memories of some teachers. Some of them still come to this podium and speak to us. I still do the tax return for my kindergarten teacher. I'm not going to say how old she is, but she is a remarkable woman.
Or how little she makes.
Yeah, or how little she makes, yeah. I'm an accountant. I won't talk anything about how much money she makes. But Mrs. Hanson is a wonderful person that I still deeply enjoy having in my life. The number one determiner of student success is parental involvement. It changes the lives of every student and assures that the education process continues when they go home. And one of the main themes of the program that we're talking about today is to help reaffirm and commit parent-teacher partnerships. The theme this year of the event is that California teachers are advocates for the public education of all students. They get the education that all students deserve. So I think that, which of you is going to speak this morning about this? Oh, well, let me read you this first, sorry. Here's what it says. The proclamation says that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Kern, the state of California, has officially proclaimed May 10, 2017 as Day of the Teacher in Kern County. It's entered into our board minutes by the signature of our chairman, the Honorable Zach Scrivener, on this, the 9th day of May 2017. Please tell us a little bit more about what's going to happen. Thank you for the difference you've made in the lives, in the lives of countless students, and we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Actually, I'm here as president of the Kern Division of Retired Teachers Association. And I need to make you aware of we're over 1,100 strong. As of March 1st, we contributed in excess of 67,000 volunteer hours to this community. And if you take the California hourly volunteer rate at $27 an hour, that's almost $2 million of service that we've rendered. Okay, where are we? We still support education. We still support our teachers, new teachers, teachers currently in the classroom. You'll find us as scorekeepers, as referees. You'll find us supporting the arts, whether it's Kern Philharmonic. You find us every place. You go to the hospital, we may be there to greet you. We may bring your newspaper to you. You'll see us at the SPCA. You'll see us as a volunteer for the Forest Service. We are all over the place. What amazes me is retired teachers don't quit any more than the classroom teacher does. In fact, we work until we drop. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Anna Posey, who is a retired school teacher and a school board member.
Thank you. I taught in the classroom for 40 years in Wasco Elementary. Now I'm currently a school board member for the elementary school district. I'd like to mention some things about teachers today. There's currently a credentialed teacher shortage, not only in Kern County, California, but throughout the United States. And there are a number of reasons why this has occurred. Can't say exactly which one is the most important or which one caused the shortage. But for 10 years, we had no child left behind, which discouraged many people from going into the profession. During the economic turndown, there were many, many layoffs, and there were a number of layoffs throughout Kern County. Much more is involved now to become a teacher than there was when I became a teacher, which seems like a million years ago, but I know it wasn't. However, no matter what the requirements are today, we know that today's teachers are dedicated to the future of our children, and that we can't forget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for serving on the school board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 10 on our agenda, the public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. And so I'll ask if there are any members of the audience who would like to make a public presentation. We ask that you state your name and observe our 2-minute time limit. Please come forward. This is for items that are not on the agenda. Good morning. Good morning.
This is, I thought it was on the agenda, the
Okay,
motion.
which item would you like to speak to, sir?
The item on SB 54?
Okay, that item will be coming up in a few minutes. If you'd like to wait until then, thank you very much. Please come forward. Good morning.
Honorable Chairman, may I have just maybe 10 seconds just to address the board? I would just like to
You have 2 minutes.
say that the Lord would have us to always have respect and honor to such a high position, such as yourself. And so I just pray, God Almighty Jesus Christ, keep you blessed, bless you with the wisdom and knowledge to keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for in God we trust, respect, and the Lord. My name is Curtis James Bingham, Sr., street evangelist for our Lord and Savior, God Almighty Jesus Christ. The Lord said, what profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? That means one person is worth more than the whole world. So me being a representative for the Lord, and how the Lord tells us that law enforcement as ministers, one officer is worth more than 1,000 people. And the Lord would have us to recognize when we're looking at jobs, every job is not the same. So when you take a look at what they do, some jobs are death jobs. And when we look at detention centers and everything, you have a lot of criminals in there. And the only thing they have on their mind is if I can get free, I'm going to tear the head off of one of them officers, not because of what they done, but because of what they done to put their own self there. A lot of people don't understand how tough it is to be a law enforcement officer, but they face that when they go in there. And so when we have issues of things like so far as who's getting what paid, we cannot pay them enough because every day they leave, they going into a very dangerous situation. So I just want to say that people should really respect and see what we're doing when it comes to law enforcement. And you got the young brother of the fire department. People don't know in a 48-hour period last month, the fire department had to go out to 246 problems. See, a lot of people don't know these things. You know, we have death issues here. People just talk and say, hey, they're out there to do their job, but it is very difficult at times. And I would like to say, when you notice a law enforcement officer passes away, everybody come from all over the state to see him. That's not ordered by them. That's ordered by our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. As great respect for them putting their lives on the line. So we should recognize who they are, get them exactly what they need, and be thankful that they're willing to go into the detention center where all the main criminals are at, and all they think about, a lot of them is not trying to change, is what they can do if they can get their hands on one of them law enforcement officers that done nothing to them. They put themselves there. Tough job, so I just wanted to recognize them as opposed to so when the Lord called me in, I'm just trying to do my job. And when you support them, you're supporting the whole city. So thank you very much, Chairman, and I pray God continue to bless you guys. Knowledge come out of a book, wisdom come out of heaven. God has really equipped you guys with much wisdom to sit in one of the highest seats in the land. In the name of Jesus, please support our law enforcement and our fire department. Thank you. May God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Bingham. Are there any other public presentations? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to board member announcements or reports. Okay, seeing none, thank you. We'll now go to item 15 on our agenda, which is under the County Administrative Office. This is a request from the Director of Airports to refund the 2011 private placement refunding debt obligation for the Meadows Field Terminal and to waive the Kern County Policy and Administrative Procedures Manual requiring a refunding of current debt to result in a cost savings to the county. Mr. Alsop, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Elsa Martinez in my office will handle this item.
Ms. Martinez, good morning. You need to flip your mic on.
Okay. On May 2nd, your board continued the request from the Director of Airports for the refunding of the $5.3 million outstanding loan associated with the construction of the terminal at Meadows Field Airport in 2003. Your board requested refunding alternatives. Exhibit A provides your board with refunding alternatives. The first column provides your board with the information of the existing loan. The annual debt service payment is approximately $940,000 annually. As explained by Mr. Strickland last week, due to a decline in passengers at Meadows Field, the passenger facility charges that pay for the debt service are not sufficient to cover the $940,000. Refunding the outstanding debt would allow the Airport Enterprise Fund to match the debt service requirements with the availability of the passenger facility charges. Additionally, the refunding would allow the budgetary savings to address a specific capital needs identified by the director. Your board can delay the purchase of any capital until the debt is paid off or an increase in demand at the airport necessitates the additional capital improvements. While we look at the option of providing a general fund loan, as shown at the far right column under Scenario 3, the loan does not qualify as a legally enforceable debt. Therefore, passenger facility charges cannot be used to repay the general fund. Furthermore, the transfer of cash from the general fund to the enterprise fund would need to be a contribution with the hope that the enterprise fund can increase revenue to make the payments. There is the risk that the general fund would have to do a write-off. Supervisor Mager is correct in stating that the general fund had to write off $4.2 million loan to the enterprise funds in 2014 associated with the construction of the international terminal. Our recommendation would be for your board to approve the request to refund with a maximum term of 10 years as shown in Scenario 1. This option increases the cost to the enterprise fund by approximately $539,000. The debt service requirement aligns with the annual collection of passenger facility charges, and the loan can be structured with the ability to prepay in case passenger facility charges increase, and the debt service can be paid off earlier than 10 years. This concludes my remarks, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Do we have any questions for Ms. Martinez before I go to the public? Okay, seeing none. Are there any members of the audience that would like to make any comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Strickland, did you have anything to add?
I just appreciate that we've taken the time to look thoroughly through this item and come up with a solution that's viable for both the flexibility of the board and flexibility of airports. And I appreciate the CAO's efforts and input on the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Okay, I'll return to the board. Supervisor Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank staff for meeting with me this week. Supervisor Gleason joined us in that meeting. The recommendation that is before us now saves $500,000 over the recommendation that was before us a week ago. It extends the payment period only for 4 extra years, and it does not call for spending any extra dollars at the airport until the airport's revenues rise by more employments and more passengers basically flying out of the airfield. So I think it strikes a good balance, and I would recommend and move that we support staff's recommendation.
Very good. Supervisor Gleason.
My screen isn't working too good here. Okay, thanks to CAO's office for coming to plan. Thanks to the director of the airports. I think this is a workable solution. It gets you what you need. It gets us at minimum risk to where we need to go, plus provides us an incentive to work hard to develop that business line to help support those payments. So I will second the motion.
Okay, I don't see any other requests for comment. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Very good. Thank you to staff for the extra time and to Supervisor Maggard and Gleason for working on this as well. That'll take us to item 16, legislative matter. This item is SB 54, Prohibition of State and Local Law Enforcement Resources for Federal Immigration Enforcement. And I'll ask our CAO, Ryan Alsop, to start us off on this discussion.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. During the board meeting of May 2nd held last week and immediately following remarks by your board, to your board by our sheriff, your board passed a motion requesting staff to draft a letter of opposition to SB 54, a bill introduced in the California State Senate by Senate Pro Tem Kevin De Leon, which makes changes to current state law concerning state and local law enforcement's communication and cooperation with federal immigration authorities. The letter that has been drafted opposing SB 54, we believe, thoughtfully incorporates the remarks made by your board and our sheriff at last week's meeting. Our correspondence also seeks a meeting to discuss the bill with Governor Brown, Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon, and as well as the bill's author, Senator De Leon. Principally, the letter of opposition conveys the concerns expressed by Sheriff Youngblood regarding the bill's impact on his ability to effectively communicate with federal law enforcement authorities, which, according to the sheriff, is an added public safety risk for our community. In opposing SB 54, your board joins the California State Sheriff's Association, the California State Police Chiefs Association, and the California Peace Officers Association, all of whom are in opposition to the bill. According to the California State Sheriff's Association, SB 54 creates a severe public safety problem by limiting and in some cases eliminating law enforcement's ability to communicate with the federal government. They go on to say SB 54 could result in potentially dangerous offenders being released to our streets. Specifically, they state, even though SB 54 allows communication with federal authorities, sheriffs would be precluded from relaying information about persons convicted of crimes like domestic violence or drunk driving unless they also had current or prior convictions for serious violent felonies. The bill prohibits communication about persons being held in custody for any charge or persons who would be released pending trial. According to the State Sheriff's Association, the bill precludes the sheriff's ability to share information that is not publicly available about persons in custody with federal authorities. The bill bans our sheriff from giving federal authorities access to interview individuals in custody except pursuant to a judicial warrant. SB 54 imposes burdensome reporting requirements regarding nearly every facet of law enforcement participation in joint task forces with federal law enforcement partners. Lastly, according to all of the law enforcement associations listed earlier who are opposing SB 54, the breakdown of local, state, and federal partnerships that will occur under the bill will, in some cases, prevent violent criminals from being kept off our streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alsop. Mr. Nations, do you have anything to add at this time? Okay, thank you. All right, any questions or comments from members of the board before I go to the public? All right, seeing none, I'd like to get an idea of how many folks would like to speak on this item. We had quite a bit of discussion last week. Okay, very good. All right, if you can please come forward. We ask that you state your name before you make your comments for the record. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Gonzalo Santos. I teach at Cal State Bakersfield. I brought you today a package of 16 graphs accompanied by 9 fact-based arguments that I submit to you are compelling reasons for why you should declare your support, not opposition, but support for SB 54, the California Values Act, sponsored by Senate Pro Tem Kevin De Leon. And while you're at it, encourage you to pronounce yourself in favor of the recently submitted U.S. Senate Agricultural Worker Program Act, sponsored by our 2 senators, Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris. I am respectfully asking you to reject, or at least table, your resolution made by staff until you hold open hearings. As your resolution is divorced from the empirical realities of your own county and the entire state of California, let alone the wishes of the majority of your constituents, and I'm referring specifically here to the Latino, Asian, and African American majority of this county, which you historically have ignored repeatedly. I will not go through this charge and arguments in the very short time allowed, and in the absence of hearings. You're putting the cart in front of the horse. You're making policy decisions here without proper hearings. But as a sociologist that actually teaches at 10 o'clock this morning the sociology of immigration, and that's why I'm rushing here, it is my opinion that you are, like your own sheriff, going against the tremendous progress we have achieved in the past 20 years here in California, if not in the nation, unfortunately, on addressing the topic of inclusion and integration of our resident immigrant communities. SB 54 takes it one step forward to extend protection to these communities in the face of current harsh enforcement of broken immigration laws at the federal level, which are being taken up again by the new administration. Not that the past one didn't do it, it also did that. Some say, if you don't like such laws, work to change them. Well, the problem is we've been at it for 2 decades trying to change them. And the same people who say this thing of go and change the law tend to be the same people who obstruct changing the law for the better. And so it's time to question their motivation, including those in this board. Now, I teach the history of this, and I know that today the motivation is anti-Latino xenophobia, anti-Muslim xenophobia, and all the typical things we see in history expressed again and again when we debate immigration. The history of ugly restrictionism, virulent nativism, racist exclusionary policies, and draconian deportation campaigns is a history of ethnic antagonism towards the new Americans that keep coming to our shores. Today is no different than when we shut the door to East and Southern Europeans in 1924, or the Chinese in the 1880s. We are in a rough ride with the new administration, but California is poised to defend its immigrant populations, a third of our workforce, and much more so in our own county, with laws like SB 54 and the Agricultural Worker Program Act. You are not in Texas, which is marching backward. You are in California, which has been moving forward. It's time you catch up with the rest of the state and join the majority of your hard-working constituents that happen not to be white. And perhaps listen to us when we say we put food on your table and we demand respect and we demand you to represent us, not just the white community, which we must admit is in the throngs of Trumpism. Okay? You don't have to join that wave. It's time for you to stand with us and change the page in Kern County. We can be better than this. So I will finish by saying, please reject the politics of xenophobia, which is what drives this whole thing, and join the rest of us in California, which are moving forward whether you like it or not. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, members of the board, Chairman Scrivener. My name is H.A. Sala. I've been a licensed attorney for 34 years, and I am a board-certified specialist in criminal law. I'm a former president of the Kern County Bar Association and the present chair of the Judicial Appointments Evaluation Committee and a member of the Immigration Justice Collaborative. Let me explain to you what that group is about. This collaborative was established to disseminate information to the public about issues relating to immigration policy, specifically some of the more recent policies by the present administration. The collaborative is comprised of lawyers from Kern County who practice in diverse areas of law. This collaborative has submitted a statement to this board by 21 lawyers in support of SB 54, wherein we urge the board to refrain from opposing the legislation. Your clerk has been gracious enough to distribute that statement to all of you this morning. SB 54 simply restricts, but does not bar, all cooperation between local and state agencies and federal immigration authorities. SB 54 is limited in scope and would only prohibit state and local enforcement, including school and security departments, from using local resources and personnel solely to enforce federal immigration law, with certain important exceptions that promote public safety. For example, SB 54 would require the parole board and the California Department of Corrections to notify ICE of the scheduled release of all inmates who have any violent or serious felony conviction, or any inmate with a prior conviction for a violent or serious felony offense. We know that these individuals that are serving time in prison will be paroled or be released on post-release community supervision. But before that's done, SB 54 mandates that the state authorities contact the federal immigration authorities to advise them, I believe it's 60 days before release, so that they can place a detention or take them into custody if they believe that they are subject to removal from this country. Contrary to what has been stated publicly to this board, non-citizens who commit violent or serious felonies will not be released under SB 54 without the required notification to ICE. That is explicitly stated in the statute. SB 54 would not prevent any state or local law enforcement agency from responding to a request from any federal immigration agent about a person's criminal history, including home address, including their location of where they are employed, accessed through the California law enforcement telecommunications system. Thus, ICE would be able to obtain information relevant to determine if an individual is subject to federal detention. SB 34 or 54 would not prevent any state or local law enforcement agency from participating in a joint law enforcement task force, provided that the primary purpose is not immigration enforcement, except where there is a task force designed to investigate and detain individuals that have previously been deported and are presently in the country illegally. SB 54 would not prevent any state or local law enforcement agency from responding to a notification request from federal immigration authorities about an individual who is serving a term for conviction of a misdemeanor or a felony offense and has a current or prior conviction for a violent or serious felony. Therefore, our local law enforcement agencies would be allowed to notify ICE when an individual is adjudged guilty of a violent or serious felony offense, either through a verdict of guilt after a jury or a court trial, or a plea of guilty or nolo contendere. So if someone is arrested and thereafter goes through the process in the criminal justice system and is either found guilty by jury or pleads guilty to a violent or a serious felony, local law enforcement can notify ICE of that so that ICE can exercise their discretion and detain that individual and, if necessary, place them in removal proceedings. Such individuals would not be released into the community without notification to ICE. SB 54 would not prevent any state or local entity from sending or receiving from federal immigration authorities information regarding the unlawful immigration status of any individual. Our local probation department presently provides such information in their pre-sentence investigation reports, and they've done so for decades. SB 54 would allow local agencies to divulge information to federal agents about the individual's release date, including the individual's home or work address, if such information is available to the public. Therefore, ICE agents would be able to use public databases to conduct their own investigations to enforce federal immigration law without using local agencies to do their work for them. SB 54 would allow federal agents access to interview individuals in local custody or to detain individuals if the federal agents obtain a warrant, which is a basic tenet of the Fourth Amendment. Requiring federal agents to comply with the United States Constitution is not bad policy. Thus, contrary to what some believe, SB 54 is not a complete ban on cooperation with federal agents, but a more focused and a more restricted form of cooperation to ensure that those non-citizens who have committed serious or violent felonies are detained by federal agents without utilizing our local resources. The fear generated by the Kern County Sheriff that non-citizens who have committed such crimes will be released into this community if SB 54 were passed is misleading at best and contrary to the explicit provisions of the proposed statute. 21 lawyers of this collaborative encouraged in the statement that was provided to you this morning to elicit further legal opinion from County Counsel on this issue prior to deciding whether you should publicly oppose SB 54, particularly since the sheriff's position is simply not legally viable. SB 54 seeks to preserve scarce local resources which provide essential services to the residents of California without allowing the usurpation of those resources by federal agents to enforce federal immigration law. During a time when our county is facing exceptionally difficult budget constraints and county departments are being required to do more with less, the board should be mindful not to allow local resources to be expended unnecessarily. The restricted use of local resources under SB 54 not only serves the interests of public safety, but also recognizes the value that immigrants have to California. SB 54 acknowledges that a relationship of trust between California's immigrant community and state and local agencies is central to public safety. However, that trust is threatened when such agencies become entangled with federal immigration enforcement, when immigrant community members fear approaching police, when they are victims of crimes such as domestic violence, and they are. There are many situations that I have been aware of where there is an undocumented immigrant that has been a victim of domestic violence, and she is afraid to contact law enforcement because the perpetrator of that crime will call immigration on them or tell law enforcement that that individual is here with undocumented status and may be placed in removal proceedings. Also, there is fear that individuals, on the part of certain individuals, that they do not want to appear in court as witnesses to crimes because of the same potential where law enforcement might notify immigration and they would be detained and subject to removal. And that is detrimental to public policy and the well-being of all Californians. SB 54 seeks to ensure that our schools, our hospitals, our law enforcement agencies, and our courthouses are accessible to all persons who reside in California. The message that will be conveyed by the Board of Supervisors in opposing SB 54 will not be a message that our county supports law and order, because SB 54 does support that objective, but rather it would be a message of divisiveness that would result in immigrants not reporting crime, refusing to be witnesses in criminal prosecutions, and diverting local resources to federal immigration authorities when such a diversion of resources is unnecessary to ensure public safety. We encourage you, the 21 lawyers listed on that statement, not to send a statement to Sacramento opposing SB 54. This legislation makes sense, it is good for California, and it is good for Kern County. Thank you.
Who will be next, please?
Good morning. My name is Wendy Reed. I thank you, Supervisors, Chairman Scrivener, for your patience and your dedicated consideration of this very important matter. And I thank you for hearing my comments on this morning. There are two things that I'd like to speak about today, which are to serve and to protect. The concept of service and our responsibility as elected officials is to serve and represent all of the people within our jurisdiction, not just the people who voted for us, not just the people who look like us, and not just the people who think like us. We must represent all of the people, and we pledge that in our Pledge of Allegiance for liberty and justice for all. The wonderful motto behind you, E pluribus unum, speaks specifically that out of the many, out of our diversity, the United States of America becomes united as one. 92% of households with undocumented residents are working households. And when we are not protecting these citizens, when we're not protecting these people, we're not protecting the citizens who rely on them, the children, the wives, who are left within minutes and hours without their working spouse, without a source of revenue, and without the family structure that we so value. The support for these people then falls on us, the citizens of the United States. And we should not forget that these are undocumented workers. 92% are working households. They are contributing $302 billion to our economy every year. So it's not their fault that the federal government has failed to enact appropriate immigration reform. And second, I'd like to speak to public safety. SB 54 does not, in fact, as the good attorneys have represented to you, does not prevent Kern County in any way from prosecuting criminals in their incarceration or from participating in any joint task forces. In fact, we endanger public safety when we discourage immigrants from reporting crimes or interacting with law enforcement officers. We endanger public safety by deterring these families from seeking medical care and vaccinations for their children, and we increase our public health and safety costs. We endanger public safety in our food supplies, in our hotels, in our construction sites, and certainly in our agricultural production when we push these people further into the shadows and allow their employers to abuse them because they are terrified of immigration enforcement under this new administration. Therefore, I encourage the Board of Supervisors not to take budgetary responsibility or any liability legally for the federal government's failure to enact immigration reform by opposing SB 54, a very well thought, appropriate, and constitutional piece of legislation. I ask you to ensure that all of our public servants and officials serve and protect all of our neighbors. Thank you so very much.
Good morning.
Good morning, members of the board, Chairman Scrivener. My name is Gabriel Godinez. I'm a licensed attorney here in Kern County for about 11 years. Been on the board of directors for the Kern County Bar Association for the last 5.5. Some of the things I want to just to address, to highlight, and I concur with my respective colleague, Mr. H.A. Sala, on all the matters he addressed to the board, and I encourage all the board members to hold this particular vote in abeyance until there's additional research, an illegal opinion by a county council. But one thing I want to bring to light is the support in opposition to 54 would have a chilling effect on our community at large. It will, in essence, I think, will have a default effect of racial profiling if this is not passed, if 54 is overturned. How was that so? Who are the people that are going to be identified for questioning on their immigration status? Is it someone with an accent, someone with darker skin, or is it in the community in which they live? The less desirable communities? Who are the people that are going to be affected? How are these particular officers going to be trained? I think what it does is inherently is going to cause racial profiling, send a chilling effect to our residents, as what was been reiterated by the two speakers previously. It will prohibit, and I think it's going to cause fear for people to actually report crimes. You may get a report, oh, crime is down. It's not that the crime would be down, it's that it's going unreported. So I encourage the board to hold this in abeyance until further information is provided or additional research to confirm everything that's been told to you within SB 54. Do the research, let's read it, understand it, and I respectfully request that the board does not support an opposition to SB 54. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Cristiana Osorio. I'm an attorney with Eaton & Associates, and I also would like to urge the board to support SB 54. Our office has been made aware of several instances currently of individuals without criminal records who have been detained. One most recently occurred last week, and that individual was not charged with any criminal offense. Despite the fact that he was not even charged with a crime, he was detained and by, we believe, the Sheriff's Department and turned over to ICE and is subject to removal proceedings. We believe this is a clear violation of the Trust Act, and if your board does oppose SB 54, that sends a message, again, to the larger immigrant community that our county is not going to provide any protections for individuals who are undocumented regardless of their criminal history, and that's not a message that should be sent by this administration. The Sheriff's Department sends out the message that they are only worried about individuals who have long criminal histories and violent criminal histories, but in practice, they are detaining individuals with no criminal history. As I mentioned, the most recent incident that came to our office involved 5 individuals. None of them had any criminal immigration status. The individuals who were able to present California ID were allowed to continue on their way to their employment, their place of business, and the individuals who did not have any California ID were detained. And again, they did not have any criminal charges were not lodged against them. So we would urge that you support SB 54 and send a message to our community that individuals will not be detained based on their immigration status alone when they don't have any criminal history.
Good morning. My name's Kathy Mars. I didn't write a speech. I stayed up last night thinking about this, and I'm back, Donnie Youngblood, with what he's saying. I have nothing against immigration. My parents' family were immigrants from Europe, and I just don't understand how you can sit there and say that the sheriff is against everybody. Everybody is sitting there saying they're against the people coming here from over across the border. That is not the case. They are here, fine and dandy. Come here legally. Why do you think you should be able to come here to the States illegally? We can't go to your country, go to across the border or any other country and live there without their permission. You can go across, if you get caught going across the border illegally to Mexico or other countries, you can get put in prison in their countries. So what's the difference? That's all I got to say. Thank you, Donnie, for backing us up.
Good morning. My name is Dolores Huerta with the Dolores Huerta Foundation, who does a lot of work in the immigrant community. And I'm going to ask this board, please table this resolution. You don't really have to take a position on it. If you're conflicted, just don't vote on it. I think that the report that you received about the support of law enforcement is not accurate or complete. There are many law enforcement agencies in many communities that have actually supported SB 54. It really had to have a lot of support if it was going to be getting out of the Senate, which it did, and is now in the state assembly. And so I think that the information that you received is not complete. There are many organizations and agencies that support SB 54. We heard Sheriff Youngblood last week saying that the sheriff's office was really focused on people that are felons. Well, that's not true. I can just tell you that a couple of days ago, there were 2 farm workers that were stopped in their car, undocumented farm workers, that were stopped by the sheriff and immediately referred to ICE for deportation. So that shows that this cooperation is going on. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we are talking about. This is exactly the kind of thing that SB 54 is trying to stop. I want to remind you, and I did say this last week, crossing the border is not a criminal offense. Crossing the border is a civil offense, because when someone crosses the border without papers, they're not hurting anybody. They're not hurting anybody. So we have criminalized people who are coming across the border, which of course is not right. And we're in this kind of position right now because the Republican Congress did not vote on immigration reform after it passed the Senate of the United States in the last Congress. And so this is why we find ourselves in this position right now. And throughout the history of the United States of America, immigrants, including, I imagine, some of your great-grandparents or grandparents, received their residency and citizenship in the United States of America. Unfortunately, when we should have had an immigration bill passed maybe 7 or 8 years ago, it hasn't passed. And it's been because of the obstruction of the Republican Party, to begin with. It's been said before, and I'm going to repeat it. Your job here as supervisors is not just to represent the sheriff's office or law enforcement. Your job as supervisors is to represent the entire community. And at this point in time, over 50% of the residents of Kern County happen to be Hispanic. Passing this resolution is a slap in the face to our community. You have had many people coming up before you here asking you, not to go against SB 54. And most of us are Latinos. We're asking for respect for our community. You do not have to vote on this resolution to oppose it. We would like you to support it. But if you, in your heart, you cannot find that you could do this, just say table it, be neutral. Please respect our community. Thank you.
Do we have any other speakers? Are there any other members of the audience who'd like to speak? Please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Richard Holcraft, Bakersfield Tea Party. We certainly support immigration. It's made this country great. However, we are concerned if the sheriff is concerned. We want the sheriff to be able to work with federal authorities to identify convicted criminals that are here illegally and tell the federal authorities that they may pick them up when the criminals are released from Kern County Jail. Why is that important? Because convicted criminals, if not picked up and deported, return to the community, and they tend to repeat crimes against residents of Kern County, irrespective of their background, irrespective of their ethnicity. We certainly do not object to more legal research on this issue, but our concerns are with the sheriff if he's concerned. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Douglas McAfee. I'm a longtime activist for peace. And I asked the board for compassion, please. You know, people call me a bleeding heart liberal, and my heart bleeds for justice and liberty and for our brothers and sisters, regardless of what color they are, what race they are. They're human beings, and I'm afraid. I'm shaking. I'm afraid that the board is making a big mistake if they oppose SB 54, because it sends a message that we live in a racist community. And I tell you what, it's gonna send a message to the rest of the country what big Kern County is all about, as far as our leaders on the board, the men. I don't know if it's ego or what. I'm not sure what drives all of you to support the sheriff. History will repeat itself. It will. 10 years ago, the Board of Supervisors approved a collective ordinance putting the sheriff in charge of issuing permits, and he issued 6 permits to marijuana collectives that were providing medicine for sick people. I thought that was a good thing for what the board did. I was against having the sheriff do it. But, you know, that was the law that passed, and I was like, okay, I believed in the system. I believed in the sheriff. But what happened after that was the Nature's Medicinal was targeted by the sheriff. He had all the information. There were so many requirements to get a collective: fingerprints, history checks, FBI checks, all kinds of stuff. It might not have been FBI checks, but I think it was. It was so draconian, so fascist, so police state. And when they were a very popular collective and they were doing what they were supposed to do. They were not violating any laws at all. No state laws, no local laws, no ordinances. They were complying everything what the sheriff wanted them to do. And the sheriff colluded with the federal government, brought the DEA in with all kinds of weaponry, and they raided Nature's Medicinal. They took everything. You know, and David Chavez, the operator of the collective, is my friend, and he's a good person. He happened to be Hispanic. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the sheriff violated state law, Proposition 215, by the people, and colluded with the federal government in arresting 8 people of Nature's Medicinal, many who were Hispanic. But it's not a coincidence, and it's not a coincidence that we have 4 white men standing before the people who will not, for some reason, stand up for what's right, but somehow just feel like they have to go along with what the sheriff says because we are in quote, unquote, law and order. It's disorder. It's anarchy, what the sheriff proposes, what you guys propose. It's gonna pit our good deputy sheriffs and put them in a bad position, a very bad position. We have respect for our department, but they don't have any respect for the sheriff. And I'm really wishing from my heart, because you know what? I really want peace and love. And I'm afraid and I'm angry. I'm going to tell you that. But that's from my heart. Real quick, we'll finish. Please stop the racism. It's illegal, ugly, and immoral.
Good morning. My name is Tony Amaranti. I live in Bakersfield. Actually, I live in District 3. And I came here this morning to talk about things that are just remarkable that I read in the newspaper. Just this morning, you know, Kern County is almost 900,000 residents. That's almost the size of North Dakota. Kern County is bigger than South Dakota and Vermont and Wyoming and Alaska. And I'm thinking this is a chance for you good people to lead maybe the whole country, because, you know, the sheriff was talking last week about how it's not about deportation of hardworking, law-abiding immigrants in the county illegally. It's about deporting dangerous, violent criminals, and no doubt the sheriff's got it covered when it comes to dangerous, violent people, but we are overdue in this country for comprehensive immigration reform. And this is a perfect opportunity, in my opinion, for you guys to, you know, pick up the ball and run with it and see how we can maybe lead in this country and, you know, be cast in a good light. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Do we have any other speakers? Okay, one. How many more? Okay.
Hello, my name is Julie Solis, S-O-L-I-S. At first I wasn't going to speak. I was just here in support of all the people that came out. But the gentleman before the last compelled me to speak out because I've lived in Kern County now for almost 21 years, and never, ever, ever in my life have I been subject to such racism as I have here in Kern County. I used to live in the Southwest, and when we lost our home, we had to move downtown. Since we moved downtown, on a regular daily basis, I see police out harassing people, pulling people over, stopping homeless, stopping people of color. And I noticed from my porch, as my husband sits ill, I take him out on the porch that's shaded because he's not allowed in the sun. And I see what's going on in the community. When I lived in the Southwest, it was rare that I seen a police officer other than my neighbors coming home from work. You would never see officers out patrolling and hunting our people like they do on this side of town, especially in Oildale, that our home is empty and I'm trying to rent it right now. And I feel very, very unsafe when I'm in sheriff territory. So our county is 52% Latino, and I'm asking the board to please stop with the racism. If you vote for this, you are voting for racism and you are supporting it. And then you wonder why our people are angry. I'll tell you why we're angry. We're angry because Mr. Gleason wants to support our racist sheriff. Mr. Scrivener supports our racist sheriff. Mr. Couch, he also supports our racist sheriff. And Maggard, you do too. Shame on all of you guys for trying to cause this unjust in the street. And instead of trying to support our people, how are we going to eat without these people? Growing up, my dad worked in the fields. He brought food home to feed us. We didn't live on welfare. We didn't take up services. My dad's a hardworking man. But yet, at the same time growing up, it was la migra, because as soon as they would say that, everybody would run. So we need to stop that, and you four should take a stand and say that we're not going to be racist and that we're going to end the racism that Kern County is known for. Thank you.
Who'll be next, please?
Good morning. My name is Xochitl Garcia. I'm a local attorney. I'd urge you not to support a proposition denouncing SB 54 and instead focus on the message that doing such would send to our community. The message would be divisive and contrary to the well-being of the Kern County residents. That message denouncing SB 54 wouldn't send a message that Kern County is a law and order county, as our sheriff is trying to do. It's rather a message rejecting order and demanding that immigrants in our community, and as you know, make up the majority of our community, remain in the shadows and would be afraid and vulnerable to crime and afraid to access essential county resources and community resources. From a cost standpoint alone, this doesn't make sense. I'd like to remind the board that less than a year ago, Sheriff Donnie Youngblood came before you and told you that he couldn't afford to accomplish even his he couldn't meet the community needs under his current budget. He stated that the gang unit enforcement was reduced by 1 deputy, the narcotics staff was reduced by 1 deputy, and the gang investigation unit was down by 2 senior sergeants. When he's dealing with a deficit like this, stating that we want to reject SB 54 just doesn't make sense. SB 54 doesn't limit federal immigration from enforcement from occurring. It rather limits our county from having to pick up the bill, from having to do what the federal government is charged with doing. Our resources should not be spent on immigration enforcement services. There is an agency that is funded to do that, and it's not our county. I'd like to remind you that that not only do we have to be concerned with the cost that a proposition like this would implicate, you have to be concerned with the civil liability as well. Oregon's already taken up this issue. And in Oregon, in the case of Miranda Olivares versus the Clackamas County, the court found that the county itself had civil liability for violations of the Fourth Amendment when the county decided to engage in a practice of enforcing ICE holds. Only ICE holds. The county had no other basis to hold these people, and in that case, to specifically hold that woman. And the county faced civil liability as a result. If this is the precedent that we want to send, and the message that any future law, we won't be abiding by it, or that we don't support it, and this law has already been shown to be to subject counties, similar laws have already been shown to subject counties to civil liabilities, this just isn't what our county supervisors should be taking up. This isn't necessary. The message only brings negative and only brings negative consequences to our county. I urge you to spend your time more wisely and on areas of this county that actually need help, and not on taking a stance because our sheriff believes that he needs to somehow become popular and please the president, whomever. This just isn't where our time should be spent. Thank you.
Do we have any other speakers, please? Any other speakers? Okay, is this our last speaker? Okay, we have 1, 2 more. Okay, very good. Good morning.
Morning. My name is Jan Gehring. I think I know, or you know me anyway. I just have a couple things to say, and after hearing everybody, there are so many levels that, I could go off on. But I just want to say that everybody in this room is made up of body, soul, and spirit. And so we all have consciences, and I want to say that I'm hearing a lot of fear, the word afraid, and I think what happens, because we're all human, we have that conscience, that if you break the law to begin with, you're going to always live kind of in fear that something's going to happen, that you are going to pay for what you did. I mean, that's just the way we are from the time we're kids to the time we die. So anyway, I'm just saying that things need to be rethought about, and I think that if people break the law coming over here, then fear starts there, and from then on, there's fear. So I would just rethink the whole thing, and that goes for the attorneys and sociologists, everybody. I mean, there's a higher thing involved here than those laws. And so I am for law and order, and I think that that's the way to go. Thank you.
Who'll be next, please?
Hello, my name is Gabriela Fernandez. I work with the Dolores Huerta as a community organizer. And the reason I decided to work as a community organizer, because I feel like we could be a tool to the community. We can work together to change policies. Right now in the audience, I have a variety of different volunteers that have been going door to door asking people to sign a petition going around to support SB 54. And just in a week and a half, we have gathered over 1,000 signatures to present on Friday to Rudy Salas. So it's very important to know that our community supports SB 54, as you guys should as well. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Board of Supervisors. My name is Alex Gonzalez. I live at 5700 Ming Avenue, and I'm a constituent of Mr. Couch. And I was also part of the group that moved over 10,000 voters across Kern County to pass propositions that wouldn't otherwise have passed here in Kern. I'm asking you to consider your stance on SB 54. According to political scientists from the University of California, San Diego, on average, counties that did not comply with ICE requests experienced 35.5 fewer crimes per 10,000 people than those that did. The research also found that counties that did not comply with detainer requests had higher household incomes, lower rates of unemployment, and lower rates of poverty. By taking a stance against this bill, you are sending a negative message to your immigrant community. You have heard powerful facts from professors, you have heard powerful facts from attorneys, and if you still choose to oppose SB 54, you are voting based on your own prejudice. Lastly, when your grandchildren look back at this administration, which they certainly will, which side of history will they be on? Will you be on? Will you be standing with an administration that separates families and bans people based on their religious beliefs, or will you be standing on the side of all people? And this is something that I don't want you to forget. Jesus was a brown immigrant man, and I'm sure he would be standing up here as well, asking you to consider. Thank you.
Okay, I believe that was our last speaker. Do we have any other before I close the public comment period? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment period. I'll return to the board. But before I do, I'm going to ask Mr. Nations. Good morning, sir. If you would like to respond to any of the legal opinions that were expressed by a couple of the attorneys, a couple of speakers were asking for additional research by County Council. I'm pretty well convinced that you researched this thoroughly. So I'm going to provide you with an opportunity to respond if you'd like to, sir.
Well, with respect to the comments about the content of SB 54, I think those came primarily from Mr. Sala, and I think he was accurate in what he was describing to you, and I think that's the issue. When you look at the letter that the board is considering, it comes down to the scope of SB 54. Some think the scope is too broad. It restricts law enforcement from doing too many things. But in terms of the content of his description and the document that they provided from the Immigration Justice Collaborative, their observations of what the law allows and does not allow are consistent with what I've taken from the law too.
Okay, very well. Thank you, Mr. Nations. Now I'll return to the board. I see Supervisor Perez has punched in.
Thank you, Chairman. I would really like to thank everyone who's come out today, and I mean every single person, not just those that agree with me or have some sensitivity to this issue in the way that I and my family and my constituents seem to have. I really am grateful that you're out today because this venue is a venue of free speech. It is a venue of political speech primarily, which is the basis of this great country that has taken good people who have spoken with great conviction to their government about what their government should be, do, what it should look like. And so I want to say thank you to every single person because each of your perspectives is worth consideration here. What is striking to me about this debate, and I am still stricken by it today, is that this particular conversation and the way in which it is couched by our local news outlets, radio pundits, purports to place the 5 members of this board into one camp or another based on the vote on SB 54. We are either stand with our sheriff and support law enforcement, or we stand with illegal, violent criminals. And the idea that everybody would nicely fit into one of those camps is really offensive and outrageous, because I don't think anybody here feels that they neatly fit into one of those categories or the other. When I see my dear friend, Mr. Sala, come forward and lay out a brilliant argument about his expertise in the law, I do not believe that what he is saying is he does not support our sheriff. I don't believe that. I don't accept that. I don't accept that today, nor will I ever. This debate, unfortunately, has forced this community into polarizing camps that purport to demonstrate that you're either one way or the other. I don't agree with the way in which that has been positioned. I do not like it. I do not like being put in that position. And I don't think anybody on this board appreciates being put in that position either, because there are good people on this board who are struggling with how to proceed in a way that is consistent, that is rational, that is reasonable for the future of this county. And so when I get calls yesterday from friends of mine who are moderate, reasonable thinkers to tell me that there are members of this community who are on a particular radio station who will remain nameless on from 3 to 6 in the afternoon in this community, are attacking myself and Dolores Huerta as being people who, quote, want to hurt innocent people. I find that to be outrageous, offensive, and morally unconscionable. Because it's simply not true. It is not demonstrated through either of our lifestyle, our choices, or our position on this particular debate moving forward. And so I want to say publicly that's offensive to me, that's offensive to this community, to the good people who are here, trying to find a space by which to have a conversation that is very difficult, that is emotionally charged, and that is polarizing this community. I find it deeply unfortunate and deeply offensive. What is incredible is to hear people come forward today who sincerely believe that this position, a position on 54, in opposition to 54, or our position fundamentally on what this particular legislation is doing somehow means that we do not support our law enforcement, or that anyone would take a position concerned about the elements of 54, this debate, and the way in which it is being couched and used against us as a community is really, really troubling. Because I can tell you that this board, several members of this board, as well as our CAO, as well as our county council, are working tirelessly to meet with and convey to the authors of this legislation any concerns that are reflected by this community, be they real or otherwise. And next week, we will travel to Sacramento. We've invited our sheriff. I hope that he makes this trip. I believe that he is going to sit down with the author of this legislation and say, here are some concerns that you can hopefully take into consideration as this bill makes its way through the legislature and as it comes ultimately up for a vote and a potential signing by the governor. I'm proud of this body that we are willing to engage in that conversation. I want to say thank you to our CAO, our county council, for helping us arrange the opportunity to come back to the table and have a conversation that is reasonable, that is just, that takes into consideration all of the concerns of this community. That includes law enforcement, that includes our immigrant community, that includes members of this community, like myself, who have done nothing wrong to be in fear, and yet I find myself in a position of fear. So I would like to say thank you again to the people that have come here today. I want you to know that we are working tirelessly behind the scenes to continue to keep the people at the table that are responsible for the good governance of this county and this state, and ensure that all of the interests, fears, and concerns are being taken into consideration. With that said, listening passionately to my friends, colleagues, and my own family about the message that this particular position sends to my community, the message that it is sending to people who are publicly attacking me on a regular basis without any opposition, it would appear. I cannot support an opposition to 54 because of the message that it sends, because of the way in which it continues to polarize this community in a way that is not healthy, does not promote public safety, and does not help us act in the way that this board does very well on a weekly basis, which is in a nonpartisan fashion to address the issues of the residents of this community, citizen or otherwise, that are helping make this place a continued great, beautiful, wonderful community to live in. And so I will not partake in a vote that sends a message to anyone in this community that is here, documented or otherwise, that they are inferior somehow to the rest of the people here who are at their core and fundamentally good people, but under circumstances such as this, driven by fear about the future, sometimes in an unwarranted sense. So I want to say thank you for being here today. I appreciate the perspective of everybody. That weighs heavily on the minds of this board as we work to craft and influence public policy that is good for every person in Kern County. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. I don't see any other comments or any requests to speak from any of the other board members. Okay, now I do. Supervisor Gleason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Supervisor Perez, for those words. Those were heartfelt, and I sincerely appreciate your concerns and your perspective, and I respect them. And you won't find me or anyone like me attacking you for a position that you have, but you feel so firmly with. But you will find people like me who disagree, respectfully disagree with your perspective, and I'd like to respectfully offer my thoughts as to why I oppose Senate Bill 54. I also recognize your thoughts as that you are, that when you say, and you people here say that you, there's a difference between supporting your sheriff and not supporting your sheriff, and you're taking a position that is not in opposition to the sheriff. You're taking a position that you feel is in the best interest of how you perceive and guard public safety. So I also recognize that. Hope I'm clear on that. What I'm saying is that you're in support of the sheriff. You're just in support of Senate Bill 54. I take a different tack on that because I believe that Senate Bill 54 is a bill that is not in the best interest of public safety. I believe that it is the federal government's job to support immigration and to define immigration, and for us to support their efforts so that they can best influence public safety. I believe that putting handcuffs on the sheriff that limits his ability to do his job impacts negatively public safety, and I think Senate Bill 54 does just that. It tells the sheriff and these good men and women who wear the uniform that we don't trust them. It's a sense that they can't do their job. I don't believe for one second that our law enforcement officers are out looking for ways to enforce unfair laws on illegal immigrants. They are enforcing the law on all of us. So I am opposed to Senate Bill 54. I sit here and open this meeting with a salute to the flag that says that we're members of the United States and we duly regard the laws of the land. And I don't believe that the state of California, by opposing that law, is in a righteous place. I think we need to work together to influence the state of California to develop a position that makes sense. And so I'm thrilled that because of the action we've took last week by opposing the law and order efforts, we now have an avenue spearheaded by Supervisor Perez and Chairman Scrivener and our CAO's office and our sheriff to sit down at the table with these leaders de Leon and to express our opinion and to come to a understanding of how Kern County feels. My constituents, for the most part, the ones I've talked to, oppose Senate Bill 54. They don't understand why we cannot deport illegal aliens who are violent criminals. I mean, that's how we feel. They're violent criminals, and why are we protecting these people? It has nothing to do with racism. It has nothing to do with anything other than defining and maintaining our nationality and who we are as a people. I'm hopeful that the meeting that happens on the 17th, I think it is, I hope it's productive, and I hope that it has meaning and has effect. And I think because we are taking a stand on Senate Bill 54 is opening the door to future dialogue and to changes that I think are in the best interest of Kern County. So those are my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Gleason. Supervisor Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, am grateful and appreciative and respectful of the people who've come this morning to speak to us. I need to start by saying that it is shameful, it is outrageous, it is completely inappropriate that someone would allege that Supervisor Perez does not support her community, is not interested in keeping her community safe, that she does not support law enforcement. I know her votes in public and in private, and they are supportive of law enforcement. It is equally outrageous and inappropriate that members of this audience would come to us and allege that we are xenophobic, racist, and bigoted. And people in this audience have said that about us today. That is equally inappropriate. For those that don't know what I'm doing, I'm staring at one of the person in the audience who is, I think, being disrespectful. Not one person was disrespectful of anybody who said anything as they made their opinions.
Mr. McAfee, you've had your opportunity to speak, and we showed you respect each and every time you come in here. We show you respect. We show you respect each and every time you come in here. We listen to you speak. We don't interrupt you, and you should show us the same level of respect. Supervisor Maggard, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would never match legal wits with a brilliant attorney and someone who I respect like Mr. Sala. I have great admiration for him. But there are different opinions about the impacts and implications of SB 54. There's no doubt that SB 54 eliminates in some cases and sometimes also restricts the ability of local law enforcement to communicate with the federal government. I think it's very likely that SB 54 will pass. I think it's very appropriate. It's necessary for SB 54 to be moderated, for it to be changed. I am an elected legislator. My job is to affect the course of law as it's developed. And the course that we have laid out to oppose 54, which is the premise upon which we asked the governor and the legislature to change elements that we think are inappropriate, I think that's what our job is. It also comes with a multi-million-dollar annual price tag, and that price tag is being pushed down to us at local government. That is not an appropriate thing for SB 54 to do. There are some who've come in the room and stomped their feet and said, no, 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 I won't, I won't, I won't. That doesn't do any good. It doesn't change one thing. What will change and make this a more appropriate reality if it passes in California is for us to moderate that language, for us to change the scope of it in a way that allows us to better protect our community. And therefore, I will vote to oppose SB 54.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard. I don't see any other members of the board that would like to make comments, so I will go ahead and share my thoughts. First of all, I think everyone would acknowledge that our leaders in Washington have failed to pass meaningful immigration reform. There's been discussions and promises that have been going on for years and years, but the system, I believe, remains broken. But it's not this board's responsibility to enforce immigration law. I think this has been it's been unfortunate, the rhetoric that this subject has elicited, and I share the thoughts of my colleagues that on both sides, that this has been a divisive and counterproductive in some respects because of that rhetoric. But I think that what we can do is try to be constructive and substantive in the way in which we try and affect public policy. This board does, on a regular basis, take positions of support or opposition to various pieces of legislation that are going to have impacts on the county. And SB 54 is obviously one of those pieces of legislation. It limits our law enforcement's ability to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. That's been pointed out by members of this board. It was pointed out by our sheriff in the discussion that we had last week. And so I am going to go to Sacramento next week, joining Supervisor Perez and our CAO, Mr. Alsop, and we're hopeful that our sheriff will also go so we can have a meeting with the bill's author to discuss the ways in which we feel that this bill is going to be detrimental to our communities and, in my opinion, makes them less safe. And so I'm hopeful that those conversations will bear fruit and we will be able to modify this language to some extent that will be more in line with what the State Sheriff's Association and our California Peace Officers Association have said about this bill and the extent to which it is going to affect their ability to protect the folks in our community, all the folks in our community. And so I'm going to vote to oppose the bill. I'm going to support the staff's recommendation. I'm going to sign that letter, and then we're going to go up next week and we're going to do our best to modify the language of that bill. I don't see any other comments. I don't see any other comments from, or requests to comment from members of the board. Supervisor Couch, do you?
I'll make a motion on staff's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved, 4 ayes, 1 opposed. Supervisor Perez.
Thank you. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is an item under the Sheriff's Department. And this is a public hearing for establishment of jail booking fee of $173.94 per booking charge for fiscal year 2017-2018. And it looks like we have our Deputy Chief, Ms. Castaneda, with us.
Good morning, Chairman Scrivener, members of the board. Shelley Castaneda, Kern County Sheriff's Office. On February 27th, 1991, your board established County Ordinance Section 4.34.050 subsection D, which formally established a jail booking fee of $57 per booking for fiscal year 1990-91. This per booking fee applies to entities which book inmates into the Kern County detention facilities, except for cities which have entered into separate agreements or which make city jail facilities available for detention of county inmates. The jail booking fee is adjusted annually each fiscal year as approved by your board. Government Code Section 54986 and County Ordinance Code Section 4.34050 subsection D requires that a public hearing be held on the matter prior to your board establishing the per booking charge for the fiscal year. County Council has approved the attached ordinance to set the booking fee for the 17-18 fiscal year. The recommended per booking charge for 17-18 fiscal year based on actual cost data for the prior fiscal year has been calculated at $173.94. This amount is based on a cost study conducted by the Sheriff's Financial Services section. This calculation has been reviewed and validated by the County Auditor's Controller's Office and meets the requirements of state law. The recommended booking fee for fiscal year 17-18 represents a decrease of 30.7% from the per booking fee of $250.87 charged in fiscal year 16-17. This change is attributed to a change in the calculation method. With the implementation of the Auditor Controller's electronic timekeeping system, the Sheriff's Office is able to track actual personnel time spent during the booking process. In past calculations, time spent for booking an inmate was estimated. Therefore, it is recommended that your board open the public hearing to establish the jail booking fee, receive public comment, close the public hearing, approve recommended booking charge of $173.94, and enact ordinance. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Castaneda. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, then I'll open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and return to the board. The recommended action is to approve and enact the ordinance.
Move approval.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved, all ayes.
Ms. Castaneda, thank you very much. That brings us to the conclusion of our AM session. We do have several items to consider in closed session. Items 32 and 33 under the County Administrative Office, and items 34, 35, and 36 under County Council. And so I would request a motion to adjourn to closed session. We are adjourned.